Hello everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. My name is Ashley Munson and I'm a Social Impact Program Manager with Tableau Foundation, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about one of my personal favorite topics, and that is how we connect our people and their data skills to nonprofits that are trying to use data to advance their mission. Out of curiosity, how many people in the audience today have heard of Tableau Foundation and know a little bit about the work that we do? Okay, so a few, but not too many. So to give you a little background, Tableau Foundation was founded in 2014, shortly after we went public as a company, with the mission of encouraging the use of facts and analytical reasoning to solve world problems. One of the first things that we did when we were formed as a foundation is went out into the community to interview a bunch of different stakeholders. We talked to peer foundations, we talked to corporate entities, we talked to nonprofits, we talked to important stakeholders in our communities. And everyone we talked to, we asked them the same question. We said that we had 3 resources to deploy in service of our mission: our product, our people, and our money. And we would ask them to prioritize those resources for us so that we could have the most authentic impact in the communities where we are working. And time again, we got the same answer. Get your product out there because it has the potential to be transformative in the space, and get your people out there because nonprofits often lack the skills and capacity necessary to really fully utilize their data and use Tableau. Money, of course, is always important and a good support, but money alone will never move the dial on any one given issue. So we really took that advice to heart, and that's how we structured our programs, putting our product and our people at the center of our grant making and at the center of our nonprofit support. And since 2014, we've given away over $40 million in product, services, and financial support to organizations around the world using data to advance their missions. And a huge part of making those nonprofit partners successful has been our people, both our employees and our broader Tableau community. We spent a lot of time and effort developing our pro bono and our skilled volunteering programs so far. And full disclosure, I still don't think they're perfect. I already have plans for what I want to change in 2020. But we've learned a lot along the way, and I hope today to share some of those lessons with you. So whether you're a nonprofit in the room looking to get some help with your data, or whether you're a person with data skills who wants to give back, I hope you can take some of this advice, incorporate it into your own work, and find those connections. So before we get into the technicalities, I want to talk about pro bono in general and the history of pro bono. When you hear the word pro bono, doesn't sound particularly new or cutting edge. It's a Latin word which dates back to its roots in the legal field. And it's been around in the legal field for a pretty long time. But it's really only kind of emerged and boomed in the technology sector in maybe the last 5 years. And there's some pretty big and important differences between how pro bono services work in the legal sector and how they work in the technology sector. And I think it's important to be aware of those right up front. So one big one that I think is who you're serving. With legal pro bono services, you're normally serving an individual. So you have your whole client base right in front of you. Whereas with technology, we're usually working with nonprofits. So while we may be working with 1, 2, maybe a group of individuals, those individuals really need to have the ability to take what they learn back to their organization. Another big difference is skills transfer. So with legal pro bono, the situation is often hopefully one-time and emergent. It's kind of an unusual circumstance that the lawyer and the legal service is going to come alongside and help that person through, and then they can move along. They're not preparing them to go represent themselves in the courtroom in a future time. Whereas in technology, we kind of are. We have this time-bound engagement, but afterwards, the hope is that those skills are built within those individuals and those organizations so that they can go on, implement solutions that were created, and make sure they're sustainable and successful. And then the last big difference that I want to highlight today is program design. So in the legal field, when you're talking about pro bono services, the actual engagement doesn't look very different than a normal client interaction, other than the fact that you're not charging. Whereas in technology, most of the pro bono and skilled volunteering programs that I've seen are custom designed for the nonprofit sector. And if we're going to design a new program from the ground up, I think it's really important that we evaluate our motives, our goals, what are we trying to solve for? And I'd like to propose that our goal should be to solve problems. We're not just doing good for the sake of good so that we can pat ourselves on the back, give ourselves that gold star and move along. We really want to come alongside organizations who are facing barriers due to data and technology and solve those problems with them. A little bit about me. My first experience with pro bono was actually on the other side of the fence. So I started my career out working in the social services industry. I worked for a small foster care organization that focused on foster care and mental health. And a big part of my role was to report back to our funders, which was often a challenging task because every funder wanted our data sliced a slightly different way. Some funders wanted to know how many girls between the ages of 6 and 12 we were serving in the greater Seattle area. Another funder would want to know how many children overall we were serving in King County that were also enrolled in after-school programs. And these differences were all usually random and had more to do with the funders' priorities and philanthropic model than it had to do with our own work. And to make matters even more complicated, all of our client and family data was stored in a clunky old Access database that was built by a volunteer. And we had this volunteer, Tam. She was a retired computer science professor from the University of Washington, and she would come in every Tuesday. So anytime I needed a new report, I'd have to wait till Tuesday, and Tam would come in and she'd build the report and she'd go on her way. And secretly, this gave me a lot of anxiety because this database had really valuable, important data about vulnerable children and families. And we really, as an organization, didn't have a grasp on our own data and how to use it. So this experience really rooted in me two important lessons. One is that corporate support should always prioritize a nonprofit's needs. I talked a little bit about how all that work to wrangle data in different ways was really to serve the funders. And I think that's important to highlight when we're talking about data volunteerism, because I think it's really common that a lot of nonprofits' first experience with their own data is it being extracted for use by a funder or some other entity. When really that data, especially when it's rich, valuable data, should be being used to inform programs and to benefit the beneficiaries that ultimately both the nonprofit and the corporate funder are trying to help. Another big lesson from that experience was that pro bono work needs to be sustainable. Volunteer engagements are, again, time-bound, and volunteers come and go. And if you're working with important data, you need to make sure that the organization is set up for success after that engagement ends, and that they are building that capacity within their organization to see and understand their data, which we all know is so important. Okay, raise of hands, who just cringed a little bit? I did. So if you're not as much of a data nerd as me, I'll let you in on the joke. Pie charts, once thought of as a best practice in data analytics and very prevalent, have since become a little bit taboo. And the reason is because we've realized that for most types of data, pie charts are not the most effective way to visualize them. In the pro bono and skilled volunteering world, I think of hackathons a bit like pie charts. It's by far the most common type of skilled volunteering that I'm seeing in the sector right now, but I really want to challenge that and ask, is this the most effective way to accomplish those goals of solving problems and building for sustainability? So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of hackathon. So some of the pros. It engages lots of employees, which is good for programs. It's a low time commitment because it's usually time bound. Most hackathons occur over 1 or several days. It's a good morale boost for volunteers, right? They get to learn about important issues and they get to put their skills to use for an important cause. It's relatively easy to plan, again, because of that time bound and location bound aspect to it, and it's low cost. But some of the cons, one of the biggest ones I see is it's not sustainable. So if that hackathon is the only engagement that you're having with that nonprofit and they walk away from it and don't fully understand the solution that was created or how to use it or how to implement it, then ultimately all that work is not going to really be for anything in the long run. Another big issue is that a lot of nonprofits are serving really vulnerable populations, and their data is really sensitive, and it's not something that they want to expose to groups of like 50 or 100 people. Similarly, nonprofit data, just like all of our data, is usually messy and incomplete. So to get it into a form where it's ready to go for a time-bound hackathon is a lot of work. And if that's not something the organization is supporting the nonprofit with, that can be a big time commitment and burden for them. The other issue is lack of partnership. And this isn't always an issue, but if, again, the hackathon is the only way you're interacting with that nonprofit, especially if there's not a lot of pre-work before, then the solutions might not actually be solving for the needs that the nonprofit has. And then the last thing is, in my experience, I'd say 9 times out of 10, when I encounter hackathons or people are trying to plan hackathons, it's not requested by the nonprofit. It actually starts with a corporation saying, we want to do a hackathon, and then they go out and try to find a nonprofit, which is kind of a solution in search of a problem. And when we look at who these pros and cons impact, the cons typically fall mostly on the shoulders of the nonprofits, while the pros are really enjoyed by the corporate entities, which makes sense why hackathons have become really popular. Now, if you are engaging in hackathons or you're planning a hackathon, don't panic, and I don't want to make you feel bad. Most of these lessons that I've learned is through hackathons that I've either planned or participated in myself. We probably will do some form of hackathon in the future, and I think there are a few use cases where they can make sense. One is if you're not necessarily trying to solve a programmatic challenge for a nonprofit, but you're doing an awareness campaign where the actual purpose is to bring awareness to that data. I've seen this be successful with things like a gender equity data hackathon, where you're generating excitement, you're creating a lot of different beautiful visualizations, and you're getting eyes on that data, and I think that can be great. Another way where hackathons can make sense is if it's within the context of a broader partnership. So if this is a grant partner that you're already supporting with other types of training and resources, if you talk regularly so you feel like you know their needs and they're able to communicate them to you, and you're just using the hackathon as a way to do some rapid ideation or quick work, and then they have a way to come back and continue that work afterwards, in that context, I think, again, hackathons can do good things. And then lastly, this kind of converse of one of the cons I listed, is when it's asked for by the nonprofit. I trust that nonprofits know their needs. I think just we should have red flags go up if it's something that we're asking for and then going out seeking nonprofits and trying to maybe even pressure them into doing it. So now that we have hackathons out of the way, I want to talk to you about and explore some of the programs that we've implemented at Tableau and found some success with. So we have 3 main types of programs that we're running right now, and I have them up on the screen, and I kind of think of them along 2 lenses, which is one is breadth and one is depth. The first program that we implemented is Tableau Service Corps. It's a program that's available to all nonprofits globally to get quick access to help for projects that are 10 hours or less in scope. And the goal of this program is really sector strengthening. It's to make something available that can be accessed by anyone who's looking for help with their data. The next level up is our program that we call Data Mentorships. And this program serves a particular kind of grant partner that we call Data Fellows. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the main goal of this program is to build data culture. And then lastly, our newest program is Mission Projects. We just piloted this program this last year and have had 2 mission projects so far. And this program caters to, again, an even smaller sector of grant partners. These are our closest grant partners. We call them mission grant partners. If you're a little familiar with Tableau's work, you might have heard of our partnership with Path or Splash, who's here in the Data Village this week. And these projects allow employees to go into the field for 3 weeks to work hand in hand with a nonprofit partner on a project that's important to them. And this top of the period is really where we focus on making a difference in that space. So let's start with focusing our first program, which is Tableau Service Corps. We launched Tableau Service Corps in 2014 when we launched our software donation program. Our software donation program, Tableau for Nonprofits, makes copies of Tableau Desktop and Tableau Prep available to any nonprofit globally with an annual operating budget under $5 million. When we launched that program, We really wanted to make sure that we weren't just throwing software out there and wishing nonprofits good luck. We knew that they were going to need some support, some encouragement, and so that was the impetus for creating Tableau Service Corps. Tableau Service Corps is the website you see above me. It's publicly accessible, so if you type in that URL after you leave this session or when you go home, you'll see this web page. And what happens on this web page is you'll see all of the profiles of our data volunteers. When we were designing this program, again, we really wanted to center it around nonprofits' needs. So we kind of flipped the traditional model. You'll see a lot of programs like this where nonprofits submit projects that volunteers can then select and work on. And we wanted to instead put nonprofits in the driver's seat, where they could peruse volunteers that they felt like best met their needs, and then reach out directly to that volunteer so they were choosing the person that they wanted to work with. So when the nonprofit comes to this site, they can search for things that are important to them. They can search for skill sets, for example, mapping, calculations, or just maybe general getting started. They can also search along terms of location if they want to meet in person and work with a volunteer in their community. And we found a lot of success with this program, especially because it's really more relationship driven than it is project driven. We recognize that projects with 10 hours of scope or less are not that big. So we don't want to make the nonprofit take a lot of time working through a scoping document and submitting this big proposal. They're just connected with a volunteer right away with a short description of what they think they need help with. And then the first thing that happens is a call where they just connect and they meet and they talk through their problems and they figure out what they can accomplish in that, during that period. And again, because we wanted to have an eye towards sustainability, although projects are limited to 10 hours or less, there is no limit on the number of sessions you can request or the number of volunteers you can work with. So if you have additional needs beyond those 10 hours, or if you have a really big project, I usually just encourage nonprofits to chunk it up into 10-hour increments and work through it that way. To date, we've had over 500 completed Tableau Service Corps projects, and we've had some really successful programs come out of it. The first organization I want to talk to you about is Operation Fistula. Operation Fistula is a global health organization that focuses on ending obstetric fistula. Obstetric fistula is a horrible, debilitating condition that affects women who give birth in remote regions without access to health care. Operation Fistula started their journey just by downloading a donated copy of Tableau through Tableau for Nonprofits, and then coming to the Service Corps site for some help. They didn't really know where to start or what they wanted to do. They worked with several different volunteers over the period of about a year, getting a lot of help, soaking in all the data knowledge that they could, and ultimately they made data a core part of their culture. What I love about this beautiful visualization up behind me is that this was not built by a Tableau Service Corps member. This was built entirely by an Operation Fistula full-time staff member who now has the skills, tools, and ability to do this on their own without the support of the pro bono program. And that's really ultimately the goal of these programs. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job. We want to make sure that nonprofits can go on and do this work on their own. They still come back to Service Corps from time to time to help troubleshoot, but really they are self-sufficient, and that is awesome. Because of their success, we've also gone on to form a formal grant partnership with Operation Fistula. So we're now, through the Tableau Foundation, supporting them with software, services, and ongoing support to advance their mission. Another organization I want to talk to you about that you may have heard a little bit about this week is Splash. They're here in Data Village this week. Splash is a water and sanitation organization that is using data to help bring clean water to kids in schools in the least developed areas. Splash had a very similar origin story. They started just by downloading that free donated copy of Tableau that's available to any small nonprofit, and then they went to Tableau Service Corps to get help and figure out what this meant for their organization. They worked with several volunteers over about the period of about a year, and this is one of the first visualizations they created. So this is an impact report showing kind of some basic M&E data, so a pretty standard starting point for a lot of nonprofits. But through some of this work, they were again able to really realize the power that data could have and data visualization could have in their own work. And they moved on to actually use data in their programs. And they're now using data to inform how they can better serve schools in Ethiopia and India. And Tableau Foundation has committed to supporting them with over $1 million worth of software, product, and financial support to help them achieve their goal of reaching an additional 1 million kids in India and Ethiopia by 2023. If you haven't talked to them yet or seen them, after this, be sure to check them out in Data Village. They have a beautiful exhibit, and their staff is there and can explain much more eloquently than I can about their work and their data and what they're doing. Okay, moving one more rung up the pyramid. Let's talk now about data mentorships. So I mentioned before, we created data mentorships because of a need that we were seeing in a particular type of grant partner. We have a grant partner that we call Data Fellows. Fellowships support networked organizations that are connected by a common goal. For example, one of our data fellowships is with Feeding America. Feeding America is a network of over 200 food banks throughout the US. Our fellows already receive things like training, services, and support, but we noticed that they have a unique need that we wanted to meet through data volunteerism. The way the fellowships work, we select one representative from usually about 15 different organizations in the network, with hopes of using them to plant a seed within that organization and hopefully grow data capacity and culture throughout that network. But that's a big task to put on the shoulders of just one person, as I'm sure you can imagine. And even though they're getting training and support and services, they really needed a buddy to kind of walk through this process with them and help them overcome some barriers in adopting Tableau within their organizations. So the goal of this program really focused on the encourage part of our mission, which is to encourage the use of facts and analytical reasoning. We wanted to make sure that although technological change can be scary and intimidating, that they felt like we were supporting them through that process, that they had someone, a shoulder to lean on, someone to lament to, someone to celebrate their wins with, and that was really the goal of this data mentorship. Above me, you'll see our first group of data fellows that we piloted the mentorship program with. This is a group of 16 fellows from NeighborWorks America. NeighborWorks America is a network organization of over 250 of the nation's best community development and affordable housing organizations across the US. So we kicked this fellowship off last year, and we paired each of these 16 data fellows with a Tableau mentor to be their buddy, to be their champion, to walk with them through this whole process. And we saw some really great partnerships form from that, and some really great successes from these fellows. One organization I want to talk to you a little about is AHC. AHC is an organization that supports affordable housing and community development in the Washington-Baltimore area. And their fellow was Emily Ward. And Emily was paired with a mentor and did some really great work together. Emily was already pretty good at data and took on to Tableau really quickly and did some really great things using the product. So much so that she was asked by leadership to present a dashboard in their next board meeting, which can be a pretty daunting task for a new technology that you're just learning to go to your leadership team and present in it. But Emily was up for the task. She knew what data she wanted to present, she knew how to access it, and she knew how to put it together. So she created this dashboard herself, but she recognized that the dashboard and the way it was communicating the data was a little messy. The board with a lot of non-data people might not really get what she was trying to take away here. So she worked with her mentor to take this and turn it into this, which was a lot cleaner, a lot clearer, and allowed her to go into that board meeting with confidence. But Emily, the important thing is, got 75% of the way there on her own, and her mentor really just walked her across that finish line. This is a quote from Emily about what she had to say about that experience. Take a minute to read it and pay careful attention to some of the words that are highlighted. I think what really comes across here to me is that this isn't about technical support as much as it is about support for building data culture. And again, that's really what I think this program, kind of the beauty of this program and what it dives into. Another person who was very successful in this program was Sarah from Portland Housing Center. And this is a win that Sarah posted in our communal Slack channel, We created a Slack channel for both all the fellows, myself, the NeighborWorks staff, and our mentors to create a sense of community, much like we do for our broader Tableau community, where they could celebrate wins, post challenges. And this was a win that Sarah shared. And again, I'm calling out some particular words. Intimidated, myself, relief. Technology change can be scary. Taking on a new technology can be intimidating. And so mentors are really just there to make sure that that intimidation doesn't take over and stop the work from being done. And Sarah and her mentor have done a great job of that. Okay, we've made it to the top of the pyramid. So our newest program that I'm really excited about is Mission Projects. Mission Projects are a program we developed to serve our closest grant partners, which we call our Mission Grant Partners. These grant partners are working on some really tough challenges and using data in some of the most innovative ways I've seen. Organizations like PATH that are using Tableau and data to eliminate malaria in southern Zambia, and now expanding that program to 3 other sub-Saharan countries. So again, we already partner with these organizations and provide them with training, support, and resources. But we identified that they really needed some in-field, hands-on support. So we developed the Mission Projects program, which allows some of our most talented employees to go into the field and work hand in hand with our mission grant partners for a 3-week period. The goal of this program really focused on the solving world problems part of our mission statement. These are our big kind of moonshot grants, and we want to make sure that we're investing in them fully. So that's why this program is one of our biggest investments. The first organization we did our mission project with was Operation ASHA. Operation ASHA is an amazing global health organization that works to bring tuberculosis detection and treatment to the doorstep of some of the world's most vulnerable populations. Tuberculosis can be a really tricky disease to treat because the treatment involves taking strong antibiotics over a several-week period. And if any of those antibiotics are missed, there's a chance that the tuberculosis could become drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is much more difficult to treat and a big threat to communities. So what Operation ASHA does is they go into communities that might not normally have access to a healthcare center because of their location, they're too far away, and they make sure those resources are readily accessible. And a big part of this is doing this through community health workers that can go out into the community, are trusted members of the community, and work with people to make sure that when there is a TB diagnosis, that we're making sure that everyone who might be infected is checked. And part of how they do this is they go door to door and they ask people about potential symptoms, and if they have any, they test them and make sure that if they have tuberculosis that they're treated, or make sure that they hopefully don't have tuberculosis. And the way that they were doing this work before was a little random, kind of just going out and canvassing, going door to door and asking people about their symptoms. And once they started using Tableau through a grant partnership with us, they realized that data could play an integral role in making this process more efficient. They wanted to see if they could put data in the hands of these community health workers so they could prioritize which doors to knock on and which people to get treatment to first. So that's the project that we partnered on for this first mission project. These are our first 2 mission project volunteers. Michael, sitting in the front, is a principal software engineer at Tableau, and Lauren Beck in the back is a manager into our technical support team. One thing I want to call out right away is that I did not select these volunteers to go into the field. We recruited applications, we screened them, we ranked them, we gave recommendations, but ultimately Operation ASHA chose these volunteers. And I think that's really important because if they're going to be the ones doing the work, if they're going to be the ones working with these people in very close quarters for 3 weeks and having them solve their problems, I think it's important to give them a voice in the process. So Michael and Lauren worked with Operation ASHA before they went to the field for about a 6-week period, having some planning and scoping calls, digging into kind of what their data looked like, what they wanted to accomplish. And they had a general idea of a dashboard that they wanted to create to help community health workers, again, prioritize which doors they were knocking on to be more effective with their time. So when they got there, within a few days, they were able to prototype up a dashboard. And the first thing they did was take that dashboard into the field with Operation ASHA and with the community health workers and test it to see, does this do what we actually think it's going to do? And it's a good thing they did, because the answer was no. They had the experience that I think many of us had when we actually start seeing and visualizing our data, is their data wasn't doing exactly what they thought it was doing. So they wanted to use geolocation data to kind of micro-target households. But in the communities that they were working with, those homes and dwellings were so close together that the geolocation data wasn't quite accurate enough to drill down to that household level. But luckily, since they were there in the field, they were able to pivot. And so over here you see what they originally tested in the field, and then over here is the solution they ultimately ended up with, which provided the same outcome, provided a way for community health workers to prioritize which patients and which households to visit first, but in a way that actually worked, which is a good thing. Another great thing about Lauren and Michael being able to go into the field and work in Operation ASHA's offices for 3 weeks is that they had a chance to work really closely with the staff and help train them up on using Tableau. And so what they decided to do as one of their last days is do a fun Iron Viz competition. I don't know if many of you are familiar with that style. I think there was one last night. To kind of just have a way to play and have fun with these new skills that the employees had built over this 3-week period. And they had a really cool moment during this experience. Ravinder, which the arrow is pointing to right there, Ravinder is Operation ASHA's database administrator. He works in the data day in, day out, is very agile with it, took on Tableau really quickly and was excited to use it more. And he decided during this Iron Viz competition to compare some data sets again he was pretty familiar with. He wanted to look at the correlation between missed doses and mortality, with a pretty clear assumption, like he's like, I know what I'm gonna see. Missed doses are gonna equal higher mortality. But again, what happened is what I think a lot of us who use data and use Tableau have experienced. He didn't see exactly what he thought he was gonna see. And that led to an aha moment for him and something that he could change programmatically. And this was a really special moment for both Ravinder and the staff, and mostly for the volunteers. Lauren said that Ravinder told her that he came over and said, you know, this would have taken me 2 days to do on my own, and I just did it in Tableau in under 2 hours. And Lauren said this was the point where she got a little misty-eyed because she wasn't really sure until this point if they'd really accomplished what they came here to do. You know, it's a big responsibility to set on their shoulders, and she kept wondering, you know, like, have I done enough? Is this going to support this organization? And she said it was in that moment that she really knew that they had accomplished their mission, because she knew that the work wasn't going to stop with them leaving. That these principles and these skills had really been adopted by the staff themselves so that they could continue the work that this volunteer experience really just started. So we've learned some important lessons from this first mission project. And I think a big one is, if you build it, they may or may not come, it may or may not work, but if they build it with you, they will come, they will use it. It will be a useful tool because they will have been part of that process. So you'll make sure that the right need is identified, that the solution works, and that people know how to use the tool and the data solution in the field. So I hope some of that information about how we're approaching data volunteerism and how we're approaching pro bono has been useful to you. But before we depart today, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we help solve world problems at scale. Recognizing that while Tableau and Tableau Foundation are doing great work, Tableau software is just a tool that has, you know, limited capacity on its own, and similarly, Tableau Foundation as an organization can only have so much reach. We can only support and work with so many organizations. So I hope some of the information today or already in you is an inspiration to support the nonprofit sector, to make sure that they have the digital tools and the technology that they need to solve some of the world's most pressing problems that really affect and benefit us all. If you're a nonprofit in the room today, I want to make sure you know about some tools that are readily accessible to you, or if you know of a nonprofit that you think is ready to start their data journey. Tableau for Nonprofits is our software donation program, and yes, feel free to screenshot if you can't remember the URLs. Tableau for Nonprofits is our software donation program that makes Tableau Desktop and Tableau Prep accessible to any nonprofit globally that has an annual operating budget under $5 million. Tableau Service Corps, as I mentioned before, is the volunteer program to support nonprofits that are trying to do good using data. And I want to highlight that this program has no restrictions other than that you're a nonprofit. So whether you're accessing software through Tableau for Nonprofits, whether you're a customer, or whether you're a grant partner, this program is available to any nonprofit, and I encourage you to use it. If you're on the technology side, or if you have technology or data skills, I invite you to come on this movement with us, because as I said, Tableau and data analytics cannot operate in a vacuum. Some of our most successful grant partners have to go through a full digital transformation, all the way from data collection and data storage to, at the very end, data visualization. Behind me is an example of a tech stack that some volunteers and Tableau and Splash have helped develop to make sure that Splash is set up for success. The reason they're going to be able to reach 1 million kids by 2023 is not just because of Tableau. It's because Tableau is working in a digital ecosystem that will support their programs and support their needs. So whether you have Tableau skills or data skills or other kind of technology skills, or you represent a technology organization, again, I invite you to come on this journey with us, because it's going to take everyone working together in partnership to really solve these problems. So now that you're really jazzed and you're all going to go home and either implement or improve or reflect upon your pro bono programs, I have some final thoughts and takeaways for you. Start with the nonprofit's need in mind and put that at the center. Design for sustainability so that the work can continue once the volunteer engagement ends. Bring your core competency to the table and build partnerships so that the nonprofits can bring their core competency to the table and help inform your work. Consider the bigger picture of how that work exists and invest in systems change. Give me 5 stars. No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, this is my first time presenting at TC. This is kind of a new sector for me to present to, so I would love your feedback, whether it's positive or critical. Let me know what you thought, and let me know if you'd like to hear more about this in the future. So thank you.